Not one horse. Thousands. A black tide of them, pouring over the horizon at dawn. Their hooves striking the frozen earth like war drums, their breath rising in great clouds of steam in the winter air. And ahead of them, rising from the Central Asian steppe like a dream carved from mud and stone, stand the walls of the greatest city in the ancient world. The soldiers on those walls have seen armies before. They have watched Persian kings and Greek conquerors and Arab generals come to their gates. Their city is old. Older than Rome. Older than the dynasty of emperors in China. For 1500 years, this city has stood, has fallen, has risen again, has traded silk and silver and secrets with every civilization on earth. But the men on the walls in the winter of 1220 have never seen this. This is the army of Genghis Khan. And they are not coming to negotiate. To understand what was about to be destroyed, you had to understand what had been built. Travel back with me, not centuries, but millennia. We are in the 8th century before the Common Era. The Iron Age. While the great cities of Greece are still young, while Rome is little more than a collection of shepherds' huts on a river bank, on a dramatic plateau above the Zarafshan River in what is now northern Uzbekistan, a city is being born. Its people are the Sogdians, one of history's most underappreciated civilizations. They speak an Iranian language, worship fire, and possess what might be the single greatest talent of the ancient world: the ability to trade with everyone. They call their city Samarkand. We know it today as Afrasiab, the ancient mound that sits at the northern edge of modern Samarkand, silent and enormous, like a secret the earth is still deciding whether to tell. At its height, Afrasiab covers 220 hectares. Picture that. Larger than 300 football fields, all of it alive with the noise and smell and spectacular chaos of a city of more than 100,000 souls. Merchants from China arrive with bolts of silk so fine you can read through them. Traders from India carry spices that make the air itself fragrant. Caravans from Persia, from Rome, from the steppes of the north, all of them pass through Afrasiab. All of them leave richer. The Sogdians are the world's middlemen, and they are extraordinary at it. Historians have found their letters, actual papyrus letters, written in the 4th century of the Common Era, describing trade routes, family gossip, political intrigue, stretching from China to the Mediterranean. These people didn't just live on the Silk Road. They were the Silk Road. The first great conqueror came in the year 329 before the Common Era. His name needs no introduction. Alexander. 26 years old, already master of Greece, Egypt, and Persia, burning with a hunger that no conquest could ever fully satisfy. He marched his army across the Hindu Kush, descended into the river valleys of Central Asia, and arrived at the walls of Samarkand, Afrasiab, expecting the city to fall as cities always fell before him. It did. The city opened its gates. Alexander rode in, received the submission of its leaders, and declared it his. Simple enough. But the land around Samarkand, the Sogdian countryside, the villages in the river valleys, the nomadic warriors on the steppe, refused to submit. A brilliant Sogdian nobleman named Spitamenes launched one of the most effective guerrilla campaigns in ancient history. He harassed Alexander's supply lines, ambushed his patrols, and in one devastating engagement, annihilated a force of 2,000 Macedonian soldiers. One of the worst losses Alexander ever suffered in open combat. Think about that. Alexander of Macedon, the man who destroyed the Persian Empire, who shattered armies 10 times his size, bled here, in these valleys, against a people most Western history books have almost entirely forgotten. Alexander eventually crushed the rebellion, and punished the region with characteristic brutality. But Afrasiab endured. As it always had. As it always would. Or so its people believed. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell around Afrasiab like tides around a rock. The Parthians came. The Kushans came. In the year 712 of the Common Era, an Arab general named Qutayba ibn Muslim arrived with an Islamic army and took the city after a prolonged siege. Islam came to Afrasiab. The city's name and faith changed. But the city itself, the markets, the palaces, the homes of merchants who still traded silk for silver, continued. The Sogdian tradition of commerce, of cultural synthesis, of surviving whoever came through the gate. It was simply too strong to die. And then came the winter of 1220. By this point, Afrasiab had been a great city for 1500 years. 15 centuries of continuous urban life. Its walls were thick, its storehouses full, its people hardened by history. The city that now occupied this ancient plateau had perhaps 400,000 inhabitants. Some historians put the number even higher. It was one of the most sophisticated urban centers on the planet. And in the spring of that year, word came from the west. From the east. From every direction at once, it seemed. The Mongols were coming. Genghis Khan was in his late 50s. He had already conquered more territory than any human being in history. His empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, and it was still growing. When the Shah of the Khwarezmian Empire, the Muslim dynasty that then controlled Afrasiab, made the catastrophic error of executing Mongol ambassadors, Genghis Khan did not send a punitive expedition. He came himself. The Mongol army that descended on the Zarafshan Valley in 1220 was not simply a cavalry force. Genghis Khan had built a military machine of terrifying sophistication, Chinese siege engineers, Persian translators, Turkic scouts, and at its core, Mongol horsemen who had spent their entire lives in the saddle. They had never lost a siege. The defenders of Afrasiab watched from their walls as the Mongol forces surrounded the city. They knew what had happened to other cities that had resisted. They had heard. Some accounts tell us that part of the garrison surrendered almost immediately, a pragmatic decision, perhaps, or simple terror. But a portion of the population, soldiers and civilians alike, chose to fight. They held the citadel. They fought street by street, building by building, through the narrow alleys of a city they had lived in their entire lives. It wasn't enough. The Mongols breached the walls. And then they did what Genghis Khan's armies did to cities that resisted. They erased them. Not metaphorically. Literally. The buildings were pulled down or burned. The irrigation systems, the lifeblood of any Central Asian city, were deliberately destroyed. And the people. The Persian historian Juvaini, who wrote about these events within a generation of their occurrence, records numbers that are almost impossible to comprehend. Hundreds of thousands killed or enslaved. An entire city, its craftsmen, its scholars, its merchants, its children, gone. But here is the detail that, even now, stops me cold every time I think about it. When the destruction was complete, Genghis Khan did not rebuild Afrasiab. He did not restore its walls, refill its markets, repopulate its streets. Instead, he ordered a new Samarkand to be built, 6 kilometers to the south. A fresh start, on clean ground, in a new location. He didn't conquer Afrasiab. He deleted it. The ancient city, 1500 years old, one of the great urban centers of the human world, was simply abandoned. Left to the wind. Left to silence. Left to the slow, patient work of time, which began immediately burying what the Mongols had left behind under centuries of accumulated earth and dust. Afrasiab never rose again. For 700 years, the mound sat there. The people of Samarkand knew there was something beneath it. There are always legends, but the sheer scale of what lay underground was unknown. Then, in 1965, a construction crew arrived to lay foundations for a new road. Their excavator bit into the earth at the edge of the mound. And the blade struck something that was not rock, not soil, not the ordinary debris of history. It struck color. The workers had uncovered the wall of an ancient palace. And on that wall, painted in pigments so vivid, so alive, so perfectly preserved by the dry Central Asian air, were frescoes, royal scenes, figures in elaborate dress, ambassadors bearing gifts, hunting scenes, mythological imagery. All of it from the 7th century of the Common Era. 2,500 years of artistic tradition, frozen in pigment beneath the earth. The archaeologists who arrived at the site were initially baffled. The colors, the blues, the reds, The golds were so fresh, so luminous, that the first experts on the scene reportedly suspected they were looking at a forgery. A fake. Something planted. Because surely, nothing real could look like this after so many centuries underground. It was real. Every brushstroke of it. Today, you can see those frescoes in the Afrasiab Museum in Samarkand, a small, remarkable building sitting at the edge of the mound that contains the greatest city you've never heard of. The walls of the ancient palace glow with scenes of court life from an empire that no longer exists, painted by artists whose names we will never know, for kings whose thrones have been dust for 1,000 years. And here is the thing that truly haunts me about Afrasiab. The thing that makes it different from other lost cities, other archaeological riddles. Most of that mound has never been excavated. The frescoes, the coins, the ceramics, the foundations of palaces and temples that have already been uncovered, all of that is a fraction, perhaps a small fraction, of what still lies beneath the surface. The city is still down there. 1,500 years of it. Waiting. We don't know what we don't know. There is a particular kind of grief that historians feel, or perhaps I should say, that humans feel, when they stand on the earth above a lost city. A sense that something precious was taken. Something that cannot be returned. Afrasiab was not simply destroyed by the Mongols. It was forgotten, or nearly so. The new Samarkand, the Timurid Samarkand that Tamerlane would later build into a jewel of the Islamic world, rose on different ground and told a different story. The old city, the original city, the city that had stood before Alexander, before the Arabs, before anyone who built on the new site had been born. It sank beneath the earth and was left to silence. But perhaps that's not quite the right way to see it. Because those frescoes survived. A painter, some anonymous, extraordinary artist living in Afrasiab in the 7th century, mixed pigments, drew figures on a palace wall, and created something so well made that it outlasted conquerors, empires, and centuries of forgetting. The Mongols could destroy the walls. They could scatter the people and ruin the irrigation channels and build their new city 6 kilometers away. But they couldn't touch the art beneath the earth. That artist had no idea, of course. They weren't thinking about the future. They were thinking about color, about composition, about making something beautiful for the king who had commissioned it. And yet, by some grace of soil and climate and sheer good fortune, what they made is more alive today than the men who ordered its creation. We live in an age that fears its own erasure. We back up our files, we post our photographs, we write our memoirs. We are terrified that what we build will not last. Afrasiab tells us something complicated about that fear. It tells us that the greatest cities can disappear overnight. That 1,500 years of civilization can be silenced in a single winter. That the things we are most certain will endure, our walls, our empires, our power, are, in the end, fragile. But it also tells us something more hopeful. That beauty has a way of surviving. That art, the impulse to make something worthy of the world, has an extraordinary stubbornness about it. That buried beneath the surface of things, in the quiet dark beneath the earth, something may still be waiting.